In the early hours of August 31st, 1961, 8-year-old Ann Marie Burr vanished from her Tacoma home without a trace. This chilling disappearance sparked the largest search in the city's history, leading investigators down countless dead-end paths. Decades later, notorious serial killer Ted Bundy hinted at his involvement, but the truth remains elusive. Join us as we delve into this haunting mystery, exploring the relentless quest for answers and the enduring legacy of a little girl whose fate remains unknown. Stay tuned to uncover the twists and turns of this compelling true crime story.
When Ann Marie Burr, 8, vanished from her Tacoma home in the early hours of August 31, 1961, it sparked a massive search for the missing girl and led police down a maze of dead-end leads. With scant physical evidence, no witnesses, no body, no credible ransom demand, and no known motive, the case eventually went cold. It wasn't until more than 20 years later that convicted serial killer Ted Bundy allegedly claimed in prison interviews that he murdered Ann when he was 14 years old and living in Tacoma. Later, in a handwritten letter to Burr's mother, Bundy denied his involvement. He was executed in Florida in 1989. Ann Burr's disappearance remains an open case some 6 decades after she vanished. On August 30, 1961, the Wednesday before Labor Day weekend, Beverly Burr spent the day preparing her for children for the upcoming school year. Ann, her oldest, was excited to start 3rd grade at Grant Elementary School. The children played with friends in the neighborhood, and Ann was invited to a sleepover, but stayed home instead. That night, Greg and Julie slept in the fort they had made in the basement, while Mary, the youngest, moved into Ann's room. That evening, a severe storm hit Tacoma, bringing down trees and causing power outages. Beverly and Dodd locked up the house and went to bed, but they both imagined hearing noises in the yard at night. When Beverly woke up at 5:15 a.m., she found Ann's bed empty. The living room window was wide open, and the front door latch was undone. A garden stool was placed beneath the open window, suggesting someone had used it to enter the house. Panic-stricken, Beverly went to several nearby houses, asking if anyone had seen Ann. No one had. She shook Dawn awake, and they called the police. The initial news report about Ann's disappearance appeared alongside a story about the storm in the Tacoma News Tribune. The early edition mentioned that Ann might be a possible victim of amnesia. As the story developed, it was clear that this was not the case. The search for Ann was the largest in Tacoma's history. Police, National Guardsmen, and volunteers combed through fields, abandoned buildings, gulches, sewers, and waterways. They found no significant clues. Detectives Tony Zotkovich and Ted Strand led the investigation, working tirelessly to solve the case. Despite their efforts, they were met with frustration at every turn. The lack of physical evidence and credible leads made the investigation incredibly challenging. The Burr family's life was forever changed by Ann's disappearance. Beverly and Donald faced immense emotional strain, and their other children grew up under the weight of this unresolved tragedy. Despite these challenges, the Burrs remained united in their search for answers. Community support played a crucial role in sustaining the Burr family's hope. Annual vigils were held in Ann's memory, drawing attention to her case and reminding the community of the importance of remaining vigilant. The case attracted significant media attention. True crime documentaries, podcasts, and articles revisited the details of her disappearance, ensuring that her story remained in the public consciousness. Social media provided a platform for sharing information and generating new leads. The psychological toll of Ann's disappearance was profound, not only on her family but also on the investigators who worked tirelessly on the case. Many officers experienced frustration and emotional exhaustion as they pursued countless leads, their dedication underscoring the human cost of such tragedies. As the investigation progressed, several suspects emerged, including a teenage neighbor and Ann's cousin. However, none of these leads panned out. In 1964, an auto parts salesman from Spokane abducted a 10-year-old girl from Tacoma but was caught and did not lead to any breakthroughs in Ann's case. The most notable development came years later when Ted Bundy was connected to the case. Bundy, who lived in the neighborhood at the time of Ann's disappearance, hinted at involvement during prison interviews. However, he denied it in a letter to Beverly Burr. Despite this, many still believe Bundy could have been responsible. In 1961, no one suspected Ted Bundy, then 14, of the disappearance of Ann Marie Burr. Though Bundy had lived in the same Tacoma neighborhood as the Burrs after his mother moved west from Pennsylvania in 1951, Bundy first became known to Tacoma police as a teenage peeping Tom and shoplifter. He would grow up to be America's most infamous serial killer. By 1974, Bundy was abducting, raping, and bludgeoning women to death, leaving their bodies in the mountains. 36 murders were attributed to him, but an FBI agent who befriended Bundy said there were at least 50. Bundy implied there were hundreds. His final victim was in Florida, where he was arrested in 1978. Bundy spent 11 years on Florida's death row. During that time, he did interviews with journalists, a psychiatrist, and researchers. During audio-taped interviews with journalists Stephen Michaud and Hugh Ainsworth in 1980 and 1981, Bundy, speaking in the third person, told them a story about killing a young girl in an orchard. In 1983, Bev Ann Burr read the book based on these interviews, The Only Living Witness. On May 30, 1986, Bev wrote to Bundy, "With all appeals likely to be refused and soon, there is nothing left for you in this world. There can still be everything good for you in the next. You have nothing more to lose in this world. Will you write to me regarding Ann Marie? Dear Beverly, thank you for your letter of May 30th. I can certainly understand you doing everything you can to find your daughter. Unfortunately, you have been misled by what can only be called rumors about me. The best thing I can do for you is to correct these rumors, these falsehoods. First and foremost, I do not know what happened to your daughter, Ann Marie. I had nothing to do with her disappearance. You said she disappeared August 31, 1961. At the time I was a normal 14-year-old boy. I did not wander the streets late at night. I did not steal cars. I had absolutely no desire to harm anyone. I was just an average kid. For your sake you really must understand this. Again and finally, I did not abduct your daughter. I had nothing to do with her disappearance. If there is still something you wish to ask me about this, please don't hesitate to write again. God bless you and be with you. Peace, Ted." Bundy was executed on January 24, 1989. The Burrs spent the evening listening to the radio, hoping to hear that he had confessed to more killings, specifically Ann's, prior to his death. He did not. After her daughter disappeared, Beverly Burr made sure the story continued to receive news coverage. There were frequent updates in the newspapers. At the 6-month mark, on each year's anniversary, when Bev and Don adopted a baby girl, when they moved from the home on 14th to a different place. In the mid-1990s, Bev received a telephone call from a psychiatrist in Tacoma. He had a patient, he said, who believed she was Ann Marie. Bev baked an apple pie and invited the woman over. I took one look at her and knew it wasn't her, Bev said years later, but she was so determined that she was Ann. The woman remembered having a canary, as did Ann and a few other details. Bev and Don visited with the woman 5 or 6 times. Finally, Julie encouraged her parents to do a DNA test. I said, "Mom, you've got to find out if it's her." After 2 years, Bev and Don had themselves and the woman tested. The woman was not Ann, but Bev kept photographs of her in an album. In 1999, 38 years after their daughter vanished, Bev and Don Burr held a memorial mass for Ann. There were numerous articles in the Tacoma and Seattle newspapers revisiting the case and the possible Bundy connection. By then, Bev was glad that she didn't know what had happened to Ann. "I still think it was someone she knew," she concluded. But she was glad she didn't know the details of how Ann died. "You know, he tortured women," she said of Bundy. For more than 5 years, Detectives Strand and Zotkovich worked to solve the case. After they retired, they spent another 30 years doing what they did best, talking it through. It was how they had solved hundreds of other crimes. Zotkovich went back to the police department to get the case file. He was disgusted and saddened to learn that half of it was missing. The two men were still trying to solve the disappearance of Ann Burr when they died, Strand in 1997 and Zotkovich in 2004. Dawn Burr died in 2003. Beverly Burr died in September 2008, almost 20 years after Bundy was executed. She was the mother of 5, grandmother of 7, and great-grandmother of 3. Ann's disappearance remains an open case with the Tacoma Police Department.